Meanwhile, one property industry player says now is the time for you to consider buying or selling property. Let's explore this further now with Jawitz Properties CEO Herschel Jawitz, who joins us live now. Herschel, tonight a lot of our viewers, we're asking them for their reaction to the decision by the SAB, and they keep talking about the fact that they don't even want to purchase anything, don't want to buy anything, don't want to invest in anything. But you say that this is now the best time to look at whether or not you sell or you buy your property.
Yeah, hi, Bongiwe. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm not sure I would describe myself as a property player, but nevertheless. So I think you're right. I think everyone's waiting to see with bated breath when interest rates start to come down. But in the current environment of low consumer confidence, high interest rates, pressures on disposable income, as an example, the expectation is that sellers, or rather purchasers, as you've said, are going to sit back. Interest rates are high, affordability is a challenge, pressure on disposable income, consumer confidence is low. The nature of purchasing property is a long-term investment, so when confidence is low, you would expect people to be sitting back. But in actual fact, the opposite is probably the case, that in this environment, what it has caused is property prices to be at levels where you can, in most parts of the country, including Gauteng as an example, you can purchase properties at prices last seen maybe 5 and as long as 10 years ago. So the buying environment, the value that you can purchase in almost all parts of the country is almost unprecedented.
And what about the sellers? Because one could then say that I might not be able to get the asking price.
So there are very few sellers in the country at the moment that are achieving their asking price. And once again, in this market, in most parts of the country, it's very firmly a buyer's market. So a lot of sellers tend to say it's not a good time to sell, and it probably isn't. However, if you look beyond what you can sell your house for and you start to focus on what you can purchase property for, especially where, for example, you're buying a bigger home, you're buying into a better area, you're semigrating from Gauteng, for example, to the Western Cape, where you're buying into a more expensive market, what you're going to lose on the swings in terms of what you're selling for your house, you're going to more than gain on the roundabouts. Because, for example, if you have a home, let's assume for R1 million, you're looking to upgrade that to a home for 1.5 or maybe 2 million rand. As the market starts to recover, the more expensive properties in the better areas or better provinces are going to appreciate or escalate at a faster rate. And so that gap between your 1 million rand house and, let's assume, the 1.5 or the 2 million rand house that you would like to buy only widens. So in a market like this, where you may not achieve the price you want, there are excellent opportunities to buy into better value.
That's quite an interesting way to look at it. And one could then ask if access to credit, for example, for those who are looking maybe to banks to finance some of their purchases, is that something that can be attainable, easier?
Absolutely. So obviously banks have their criteria, and there are obviously a whole layer of buyers, and I would say probably particularly in that first-time buyers market that are under a bit more pressure now, high interest rates, issues with a rise in food and fuel prices. But the lending environment is extremely positive. Banks are fighting for business, as is everyone else in the economy at the moment. And so competition between banks is good for buyers, good for borrowers. Rate concessions are really good. The loan to values, in other words, what percentage of the purchase price the bank will lend you as a home loan, are really competitive. And the conversion rates, in other words, the percentage of bonds that are being approved relative to the number of applications, is still very strong. So if you combine a relatively positive lending environment with the value that the current residential market is offering almost across the country, despite the economy, despite some of the uncertainties, the buying opportunities are the best they've been for a long time.
I suppose then it's also then the best time to negotiate a little bit on what the bank could be offering you and the repayment terms?
Absolutely. So once again, the rate concessions, the interest rates that the banks are offering at the moment are very competitive because they're competing for a bigger slice of a smaller pie. The residential market is not growing as it has in previous years. And there's always the opportunity to negotiate to see if you can get a better rate, or potentially to apply to more than one bank to see who's offering you the best rate. And there are lots of new players coming into the home loan market, Capitec, Discovery. So the competition between lenders is only getting fiercer, and that's good for consumers, good for home buyers.
And what factors then does one need to consider? For example, if, you know, your earlier example, if someone is looking to move to a much more upmarket area and they're thinking about, you know, some of the considerations. So what should I be thinking about, for example, as a buyer?
So I think the one thing that you should be thinking about is just to do your basic homework. So firstly, get a market valuation on what you can expect to sell your home for. Now, I say this really carefully because a market valuation is not what you would hope to sell your home for, what you would like to sell your home for. It's in the current market, what you can actually achieve for your home based on, for example, similar sales that have taken place in your street, in your suburb, or in your area. It's no good fooling yourself into a number that's not achievable, and especially in the current market. And that gives you a starting point. And then similarly, to start to do the research in terms of what homes are selling for, not what they're listing or marketing at, but what they're actually selling for in the areas in which you would like to move. And then you can start to do some basic affordability calculations, whether you go to your bank or you go to a mortgage originator as an example, and you can start to do some basic calculations and basic sums to say, if this is what I can achieve for my home, this is what I can afford to spend, this is what I can afford to buy.
Quite an interesting conversation. Thank you so much, Herschel. Do appreciate your time. That is Jawitz Properties CEO, Herschel Jawitz, who's speaking to us about, you know, the property market. One would think that it's time to stay away, but listening to some of what's coming out from that conversation, there are, of course, some factors that you can consider.